I'm a lion. Hear me roar. No, scratch that. I'm a lion. Hear me meow. Hi, everyone. This is Will O'Toole welcoming you to another edition of Park Ridge Sports History. This week, it's a pre-Thanksgiving Day show, so I'd like to really send a warm, happy Thanksgiving to all the people who watch the show. That just might be Howard and me, who are the only ones watching the show. But regardless, if you do watch the show, I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And as always, thank you for allowing me into your homes to talk everything sports. This week, I would like to focus on the Lions because as a kid, I was never a big Lion fan, but I never didn't like them. And I think one of the reasons stems from the fact that you would watch them every Thanksgiving Day game. And so I'd like to do a little history on the Lions. It is definitely a franchise that has been snake bit. It obviously has not won a championship since 1957. I mean, I've been around for 60 some odd years, and I've never seen the Lions in a championship game. In fact, really, I've only seen them win 2 playoff games in their entire history since I've been around. And I'm going to get into that a little bit because this is a franchise that kind of started out pretty good and has not even smelled any kind of success in the last 60 years. And the only reason you say that is that, you know, starting with Pete Rozelle becoming commissioner of the NFL, where he tried to water down the schedule and make everything equitable so that every team had a fair chance. And where if you had like a terrible record one year, they'd give you a soft schedule the next just so that you could improve your standing. The Lions have never come close to the Super Bowl. And even in the years where they had some good teams, they got smoked in the playoffs. So I'd like to go into a little bit of history of the Detroit Lions and their failures over the last 60 some odd years of not even winning a championship. And I really, without that being said, I'll go into, you know, some of their great players of all time. They have had some interesting players in their history. Probably today's generation wouldn't even recall Barry Sanders, but he was an elite running back. Some people feel he arguably might be the greatest running back in NFL history. I'm not among them. I still think it's Jim Brown, and it's not because of my age. Just take a look what he did statistically speaking. He didn't hang around like many of the other running backs, and he was just a great, phenomenal athlete, Jimmy Brown. And he did play at a time in the mud. So I think that adds to the romance. As I have said on previous shows, one of the reasons why I always like Cleveland, it could be August 5th and, you know, they might have a exhibition game at old Municipal Stadium, the Mistake by the Lake. And it could be muddy and there could be mounds of snow still up on the side. And of course, the Cleveland Browns would play their home games in that complete white uniform with just the striping of brown and orange. And by the end of the first tackle, everybody was just smeared in mud and grass stains. It was just a great thing back in the 60s. It just seemed that Green Bay and Cleveland always played in muck and mud. And I know they didn't make the equipment manager too happy with the mud and the grass stains and the blood on their jerseys and their pants, but they were a fun team to watch in the 60s. And of course, I just missed Jimmy Brown, but I got to see a guy named Leroy Kelly, who was just a phenomenal player as well. In fact, being a Cowboy fan, it seemed like Leroy Kelly was always putting a dagger in the Cowboys' playoff chances. Speaking of which, so now we're going to segue. The Cowboys, like the Lions, have traditionally played on Thanksgiving. Now, that wasn't always the case. There have been, as I was doing some of the research, because one of the reasons I really enjoyed doing this show, and again, a shout out to Howard, who has really enthusiastically embraced this, is the fact that I get to do some sports history research. And I will tell you that I love doing the baseball research, and I'm probably more privy to the baseball research than I am the other three sports. But this gives me an opportunity to really investigate some of the old NFL franchises. And that being said, never realized that Detroit really started as the Portsmouth Spartans and then moved to Detroit around the 34 season. And in fact, hang on, I'm using my football reference here, but they actually had some decent teams early. 1930, the franchise comes into being as the Portsmouth Spartans. By 1934, they had moved to the bigger city of Detroit, and they won their first title in 1935. So you're talking about a franchise in basically 6 seasons, if you include 30. So 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 6 seasons, they win a championship. That's not too bad, considering that there were the more established teams like the Cardinals and the Bears and the Giants and the Packers. So it seemed like Detroit was off and flying. Problem is, they are led by a very good coach by the name of Potsy Clark, and this was the only picture I could really find. I didn't get a color one. I do have other ones that are colored, and this is Potsy Clark. Now, didn't realize about him. He actually coached at both Kansas and Nebraska, was 22, 30, and 6 on the college level, but comes to Detroit. And Clark actually has this team up and running. And in fact, Clark runs this team, wins the championship. Let me just see something here. I just want to get him on the thing. And I'm using Football Reference. Just love it. Clark, in his 6 seasons, actually he becomes coach in 1931 and leaves the Detroit franchise in 38, then comes back in 39. He wins the championship, but ready for this? In his first year with the Detroit Lions, playing under the guise of the Portsmouth Spartans, they go 11-3, then 6-2-4, 6-5, 10-3, 7-3-2, 8-4, 7-4, and 7-4. He kind of leaves, comes back, and goes 5-5-1. So this is a guy with success, has a championship. I don't think there would be a Lion fan today who wouldn't be happy to have Potsy Clark as their coach, because he does guide them to a championship, albeit not in a year of their best record. That was the year before, 1934, when they won 10 of 13 games. And they actually finished second of 6 in the division. And then they win the championship, going 7-3-2. And just for all of my trivia guys out there, they go 7-3-2 and beat the Giants 26-7 in the championship game. Ready for this? The game was held on December 15th. I mean, we're not even done this year. December 15th will bring us to like week 13 in the NFL. It just goes to show you how the game has really expanded. But ready for this? He goes win, tie, loss, win, loss, win, win, loss, win, tie, win, win, win. So basically, he's 5-3-2 on November 24th, and then wins his final 3 games, including the championship over the New York Giants, to get the Detroit Lions' first championship. But here's the deal. They go another basically 20 years without winning. And in those years, ready for this, they go through a number of coaches. In 1946, the war year, they lose 10 of 11. They actually go 1-11. Actually, from 46, 47, and 48, they actually won 6 games and lost 29. They kind of right the ship, and they hire a guy like in 1952, after they had a coach named McMillan. His first name was Bo McMillan. He had been the coach for the Lions, and basically goes 14-24. I knew I had it right because he had all those losses. He had 2 double-digit losses. And they hire a guy by the name of Buddy Parker. And Parker brings the Lions success. Ready for this? They win 3 championships over the next 5, 6 seasons. Now, Parker doesn't win the championship in 57. That's George Wilson. But he does win 2 championships and loses a third. This is how good he was. He was a good coach, Buddy Parker. And he actually finished with a record of 104-75. And with Detroit, he was 47-23. Now, where did Parker come from? He actually came from the Steelers. And anybody who saw earlier, I don't have a picture, unfortunately, of Parker. I don't know why I wasn't able to get one, and I apologize. But Buddy Parker actually coached the Steelers before coming to the Lions and had some success with the Steelers. And everybody who has been a Steeler fan knows that starting with Chuck Noll's era in 1969, the Steelers were a terrible team, a terrible franchise. I mean, they couldn't get out of their way losing. Chuck Noll comes in, gets Mean Joe Green and Terry Bradshaw, and then really, under his leadership, has a ton of Hall of Famers play for that the Steel Curtain, and they win, of course, 4 championships. But if you are a Steeler fan prior to 1969, and again in '69, Noll goes 1-13. But if you were a Steeler fan prior to 1969, it was really, oh boy, it was terrible. It was terrible. And I don't even know how they kept a rabid fan base. And since then, though, they've actually probably had more success since '69, because now you're talking about 50 years of success. They're probably now known more as a successful franchise than they were prior to Noll's arrival. But Buddy Parker had coached the Steelers, and indeed, actually, he had the Steelers. He was 51-47 with the Steelers. Now, the question is, why did the Steelers ever let him go? And that'll be another day. Detroit lucks out. He goes 47-23 for the Lions. And he wins 2 championships with the Lions. And I'll just give you, I believe on that team, ready for this? Here's some of the guys that were on that team. Here's the roster. They, of course, had Bobby Lane. They had a guy by the name of Ollie Klein. Doak Walker. I think you've heard of him if you're a big football fan. So they were able, and in fact, I think I have a picture of Doak Walker here. Here's Bobby Lane, and I don't know why I didn't show this, but Bobby Lane right here along with Barry Sanders. Really bookend, you could say bookend Hall of Famers. Bobby Lane, look at the old style uniform. That's what I really get a kick out of. This is actually one of my favorite football cards. I think this might be 1987. It's a Topps. I just like it because so often you see the ball players either like a headshot or quote unquote in action, something like this. This is Sanders on the bench. And he's got a look of, oh man, I can't believe this franchise, that I'm still playing for this franchise, because no matter what I do, no matter how well I perform, this team is still mediocre. That's the look he has on his face. But Bobby Lane leads them to back-to-back world championships and a third championship appearance. And now, here's where I remember the Lions. I remember the Lions back in 1970. Probably my first Thanksgiving Day game I remember of the Lions. And I think one of the reasons was my dad was a principal. So we would go to the Thanksgiving Day games, high school, and those games would be about 10:30, 11. And as I remember, it always seemed like we were traveling, that we weren't home. Anyway, the game would be at 10:30. We'd arrive, probably the game would last like 2 hours. So you're talking about 12:30, maybe 1 o'clock. We would get home about 1:30, and the Lions would be on. Now, the only thing is the Lions used to start, I believe, at noon. Now they start about 12:30. Or it just seemed that I always caught the Lions in the third quarter. And one of my big memories was Tiger Stadium, or Briggs, had mounds of snow in the background. They, like the Browns and the Green Bay Packers, always seemed to be playing in mud. But I would always catch the latter stages of the game. The one year I do recall, and I actually thought the Raiders had won, but again, I went to the reference. The Raiders appeared against the Detroit Lions, and the Lions won the game 28-14. But as I recall, it seemed like George Blanda came off the bench and tried to do some last-minute heroics for the Raiders, and of course came up short. Now, the reason I remember that Raider team so well is that they finished 8-4-2. I didn't realize that they made the playoff. Actually, they went to the championship game and lost to the Baltimore Colts, who would beat the Cowboys, who also play on Thanksgiving Day game. And we'll recall that. But that 1970 team was led by a guy by the name of Alex Karras. Most of you remember him as as Mongo in Blazing Saddles. He was a pretty good actor, Alex Karras. He is in the Hall of Fame. He's had a checkered NFL career, to say the least, and we'll get into that in a second. But I just remember him as being, it's so funny. I was looking at his stats, his measuring. He was like 6'2", about 245, maybe 260 at the most, and wasn't Karras was nowhere built like the players of today. He just kind of looked like your average guy who just happened to be big, like one of your softball buddies, one of your weekend warrior kind of players. I always liked Alex Karras. I do like this uniform in particular with the Lions. They don't have all the striping and all the rest of it. This, I think, might be about 1965. This one. But what I remember, what I loved about the old Topps cards, and this one is the back of the Topps cards. And it says, rock-ribbed Alex is one of the Lions' strongmen. In college, he won many coveted awards and led his Iowa team to the Rose Bowl in his junior year. He wrestles professionally. I just love that because I've always been a big wrestling fan. And I never realized that Alex, until I saw this, actually wrestled professionally. Now, I don't know where he was. He was probably on the circuit in the Midwest and all the rest of it. But Alex, reading about his career, I know he's from Indiana, and he goes out. He kind of had a tough life early, goes out to Iowa, was recruited to Iowa, and from what I gather, never liked his coach at Iowa. Regardless, though, he becomes an All-American for Iowa, leads them to the Rose Bowl his junior year, as stated. And I do believe he won, I want to say he won the Outland Award, goes to the Lions, and, is very successful. I know that Alex Karras, many people probably remember him, as I said, from Blazing Saddles, but he had a pretty good role in that movie Paper Lion, which is George Plimpton's attempt to make the Lions, I think, in 1969. And, of course, on that team or coaching that team was a fellow by the name of Joe Schmidt, who I kind of remember well. I don't remember him, obviously, as a linebacker, but I also remember this fellow by the name of Lem Barney, probably one of my favorite Lions of all time, but number two, one of my favorite cornerbacks. I just thought he was just a really cool player. And he's next to a guy by the name of Milt Plum. Now, Milt Plum is not, he's not anywhere near the players that Lem Barney or Alex Karras were. But I just remember him as a quarterback on Lions teams. And, of course, here's one of the, I guess this is what you would call, they did Topps. I think this might be a Topps card where you used to play football, like scratch-off football. But this is so 1960s stylistic art, which I did love. And for a while, the NFL used to do this all the time. In fact, I recall getting this art, for lack of a better, you would color in with pencils and or paints. It was colored by pencil. And I remember getting NFL players and teams, and the players kind of looked like this. So this would all be, black and white, and then you would color in according to what team it was. So if it was the Lions, you would color in the colors, the specific colors of blue and silver. And of course, then you have a guy named Charlie Sanders. Now, the reason I'm bringing all these up, I just want to get these cards out there, and I want to get some other pictures besides me up here. But the Lions, traditionally, like I said, would play on Thanksgiving Day. And I always thought they were pretty good on Thanksgiving Day. You got to remember, I'm 9 years old thinking that the Lions are pretty good. And in 1970, I guess this goes back to it, the Lions win on Thanksgiving Day, and they actually make the playoffs because they rally. I think they were 5-4 at one point, and they rally. And they make the playoffs, and they're 10-4-1. Wait a minute, I just want to see something. I want to say they're 10-3-1, but I think they were 10-4, and they finished as the wild card team, all right, in 1970. And that team was led by Joe Schmidt as their coach. Joe Schmidt is their coach, and yeah, they finished 10-4, and their schedule was this. They met the Oakland Raiders on that day. They were actually going in to November. They were actually 1, 2, 3, 4. They were actually 5-4 going into November. They beat the Niners the Sunday before Thanksgiving, then beat the Raiders, beat the Cardinals, who were playing in St. Louis then, and beat the LA Rams on the final second to final week of the season. And then on December 20th, they beat the Packers. So they actually won their last 5 games and make the wild card and lose to the Cowboys 5-0 in a game I do remember. The Cowboys had a Mike Clark field goal and a safety to win the game. And I was a Cowboy fan. And I remember biting my nails watching that game. And it was played in Dallas, I believe in the Cotton Bowl, if I recall. But that was really the last kind of I remember the Lions being any good. Not that they don't win Thanksgiving Day games in 71. I think they played in 71. Ready for this? They play Kansas City and beat Kansas City. And that's how I kind of remember it. And Kansas City, of course, had been a couple of years removed from being the Super Bowl champs. So I was really, really fascinated by the Lions. I always thought they were pretty good. Turns out, though, the Lions are really not that good on Thanksgiving. And the funny thing is, they're one of the hosts. They've actually gone. Ready for this? I think I had this. Let me just see something. Yeah, here it is. They are actually 37-42-2. And here's the funny thing. The team with the best record on Thanksgiving Day, if we're just going by winning percentage, this will floor you, is the New Orleans Saints. They're 3-0. And I would probably put second would be the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 6-1, which is pretty good when you consider that they've played the Lions and they've won 6 or 7 contests in Detroit. Just rounding out. So here are the Lions, 37-42-2. Now, have they played? They have not played the new Cleveland Browns. Obviously, they've never played Dallas. They have not played Carolina or Seattle. They have not played San Diego or L.A. Actually, L.A. to San Diego, back to L.A. They have not played the Chargers, which I was kind of fascinated with. Cincinnati, they have not played. Jacksonville, they have not played. And Tampa Bay, although Tampa Bay has played, I do believe, on Thanksgiving Day. Interestingly enough, usually their opponent is from the Central, the NFC Central, or the North, as they call it too. All right, Green Bay, 14-20 on Thanksgiving Day. The Bears, 19-15-2. Minnesota, 6-2. And the other guy I'm going to put in here, I couldn't believe how many times they've actually played. The Arizona Cardinals are actually 6-15-2. Now, I'm mentioning Arizona because for a couple of years there, the Cowboys vacated, or the NFL vacated giving Thanksgiving Day to the Cowboys, and the Cardinals asked and were granted the chance to play on Thanksgiving. but I've seen some video on it. I've seen some stories on it. It never boded well. 1, for the Cardinals, 2, for the NFL, and 3, specifically for the Cowboys. It never accomplished what they wanted. So after those 2 experiment years with the Cardinals, they went back to the Cowboys, and they've been playing since then. Now, the NFL has expanded to a 3rd game, usually at 8:30. But for years, and this is just as I remember it, the Cowboys always played the 4 o'clock game, and the Lions played the 12:30 game. And like I said, I would forget. I would only see half of the Lion game, but still, I really did enjoy watching the Lions play because it was outside, it was cold. Like I said, you'd see mounds of snow, and really, you never really got to see the Lions all that much. When we were growing up, probably, and this is one of the reasons why Dallas became America's team. 1, they were a successful franchise. Number 2, they had a guy by the name of Roger Staubach who was famous for bringing his team back and rallying them. Plus, I think the fact that he was a Heisman Trophy winner and played at the Naval Academy, I think all that added to the whole romance of Roger Staubach. I think a lot of people follow the Cowboys specifically because of Staubach. Actually, it turned out I was one of those people because really when Staubach left, I stopped rooting for the Cowboys. And anyway, the Cowboys, though, they would get that game on national TV. And the fact that they were very successful, they started out terrible. They didn't win too many games their first few years. Then they make the playoffs, and then they really worked their way into the heart of not just Texans and the Southwest, but really all of America because they were a dramatic team. And their comebacks were amazing. And you can say all you want about the Minnesota game with the Hail Mary pass from Staubach to Drew Pearson. Was it interference? Well, it looks it on replay. Would it probably pass the replay today if they had gone to it? Probably not if they could challenge it. But regardless, that was a game. Dallas didn't play all that well. They went up there, and in the last few seconds, they defeat. But that was, and the only reason I bring that up is that was kind of quintessential Dallas, always pulling out the games in the last second. Well, that's going to generate a lot of fan interest. And then the fact you're on TV. Now, well, you can watch anybody anytime. So my point being with the Lions, they would, I guess that might have been the only time I would see the Lions play. Other than maybe a Monday night game. And like I said, they make the playoffs in 70, but they don't get back to the playoffs for a while. In fact, like I stated, for years it was you only got to see the Lions on Thanksgiving Day. And then they would just, it seemed that they would play their Super Bowl on Thanksgiving Day, and then they would just disappear from the playoffs. And how do I know that? Well, I was looking at their playoffs performance. The game that I talked about in 1970, where they lost to Dallas, that would be one of their first losses in a string of losses until they got, ready for this, until 1992. All right, they lost to Dallas 5-0. They lost to Washington. They lost to Seattle. They lost to Dallas. And that was actually probably their closest loss, 24-20. They lost to New Orleans, 45-22. They lost to Washington again, 27-13. They lost to Tampa Bay, 20-10. They lost to Philly, 58-37. These are all playoff games. They lost to Green Bay 16-12. Okay, same point differential as the Cowboy game. They lost to Green Bay again, same point differential, 28-24. They do beat the Cowboys in 92. A Cowboy team that would be in the midst of, let's say, winning 3 Super Bowls, and they thumped them 38-6. But then they would lose to Washington in the championship game, 41-10. So in my lifetime, I've seen them win one playoff game. In my lifetime, I would see them win one playoff game. Okay? I mean, and you know what? The Lions can't even say it's the curse of Ruth or it's the curse of the GOAT for the Chicago Cub fans. They can't even say that. There's been no quote unquote curse put on this franchise. They have just been mediocre at best. And in fact, outside of Buddy Parker, ready for this? Here are some of the coaches that they hired. And I'm only including coaches who had, let's say, 3 or 4 years where they gave them a shot, the Detroit franchise. Joe Schmidt actually was 43, 34, and 7. He had a .558 winning percentage. So technically he's their best over the last 50 years, but he doesn't win a championship. And he was the coach, and I'll get that to you again. He was the coach in 1970 when they lose with Len Barney and Alex Karras. And I have to tell you another story about that 1970 team. Alex Karras right here. I don't know what it is about Karras. He just always made me laugh. And it wasn't just from Blazing Saddles. I just loved him. But here's Joe Schmidt as a player. He is a Hall of Famer. He actually had the best Lions record, .558. And he topped George Wilson. And he chopped, actually, here's a guy maybe they should never have let go, and that was Jim Caldwell, who was 36 and 28 with a .554 winning percentage. All the rest that they had Wayne Fontes, who was a game under 500. They had Darryl Rogers, who was 22 games under 500. They had Bobby Ross, who was 27 and 30. And they had Jim Schwartz, who is now, I think, a defensive coordinator. But I don't want to say where because I know I got it wrong. But he was 29 and 51. Really have not hired the right coach for this franchise. I just want to bring up Alex Karras because there was another moment, though I do remember. And if you are a real NFL fan, you will recall this. I do know the date. It was November 8th, 1970. And if you ever see the YouTube or if you see highlights of it, Alex Karras will talk to you about the 63-yard field goal that Tom Dempsey of New Orleans made against the Detroit Lions, I believe in New Orleans, to win the game for the hapless Saints, 1917. On that field goal, and Alex Karras, you can see Karras in the video. And, of course, Tom Dempsey was a great story. You know, he was born with a club foot and a missing hand, or he had kind of like a club for a hand, and actually etched out quite a career as a field goal kicker. He's not Adam Vinatieri, but he had some pretty decent seasons. And like all kickers, you know, was a journeyman. You know, I'm here 2 years and I go somewhere else or I go somewhere else. But on that day, 1970, November 8th, 1970, New Orleans in a last-ditch effort comes out, and I think it's Danny Obranovich who actually was the holder. And as I say that, I know I got that wrong because I think it's somebody else. Anyway, he winds up, and this is when the field goals were right on the goal line, not 10 yards in the back. Winds up and nails this, and it's a line drive, and it doesn't look like it's going to get over, and it just makes it 63 yards. Here's what people forget. It was done in the mud, a rainy day, muck, muddy. And Alex Karras actually stated after the game, and this is my point. If you watch him on the videos, and you can't miss number 71, he doesn't even try to block the play. They were actually, he said later on, they thought it was a joke. And they kind of were laughing about it and kind of gave a half effort going after the kicker. They actually just let him kick it. And it turned out it could have cost them getting into the playoffs. They lost that game November 8th. Then they win. against San Francisco and start their run to the playoffs as a wild card team. And Alex Karras, if you take a look, he doesn't even really, he gives it kind of a half effort on the play. All right, I have to tell you this. I want to talk a little bit about Lem Barney. Lem Barney, of course, was a great player from one of the traditional black schools. I believe he went to Grambling, not Morgan State. At the time, well, Morgan State produced Leroy Kelly. I believe Lem Barney was from Grambling. Of course, the great Walter Payton was from Jackson State. Players in the 60s, many African Americans went to those black schools and had unbelievable pro careers. Lem Barney was one of them. I remember Barney being one, you would probably equate him to Deion Sanders, maybe not as good. I know that he had quite a few interceptions and interception returns, but he also actually ran back kicks. And he was all pro a couple of years, had a very good career. The funny thing is, the last time I heard or saw anything about Lem Barney was the fact that he was kind of saying that football might not exist in the next 50 years because of all the injuries and the concussions and all the rest of it. And he's one of those people, one of those players who actually is thinking that really the NFL might not exist in the next 50 years. I remember him coming out with a story on that. But he was a good player, real good player. In fact, let me just see if I can find him on this as I continue. I'm just looking at the futility of, although I will tell you this, the futility of the Lions in the playoffs. It really is. It's terrible. The funny thing is they beat the Giants in 35. They beat the Rams and the Cleveland Browns in 1952 to win the title. They lose to Cleveland in 54. And in 57, they defeat San Francisco and Cleveland. Actually, that was their last big win, defeating Cleveland. And they smoked them 59-14 in the playoffs. So the Lions have had an interesting, to say the least, history. Let me just see if I can get the rosters on there. With Lem Barney. Oh, boy, I hope I can find him real quick for you. Here he is, top of the list, number 20. He went to Jackson State, not Grambling. So he, like Walter Payton. Ready for this? Interceptions in his career. He had 56 interceptions in his career, 7 touchdowns. Ran back his long, 71. He had a 62. He had a 64. And he had a 49-yard return. He actually, his rookie year, he was phenomenal. He made the All-Star team. He was All-Pro in 68 and 69. Interestingly enough, ready for this? He had 10 interceptions in 1967, his rookie year. He had 232 yards in interception return yardage to lead the league. His 10 interceptions also led the league. But ready for this? It went 10, 7, 8, 7. And then everybody wised up and basically stopped throwing his way. Why? Because right after 1970, and I don't know why he doesn't make the All-Star team there. He had a great year. He had 7 interceptions, 168 yards, and 2 touchdown returns on interceptions. And I'll get to the other stuff in a second. But right after that season, everybody seemed to stop throwing the ball his way because it went 3-3, 4-4, 5-2, and 3. Actually, when you think about it, it's pretty amazing for a cornerback to have that many interceptions. 56 in his career. 11 years he played. He also recovered 17 fumbles. Actually, ready for this? He recovered 25 fumbles. This guy was a phenomenal player and returned 17 of them, gained 163 yards, 74 of them on one play. He doesn't score any touchdowns on his fumble recoveries, but just a great, great play. Let me just get his picture again. just a great, phenomenal player. And of course, I love this one. Here he is, Lem Barney. But here he is, Lem Barney right here with the mustache. Now, when I remember him, he doesn't have the mustache. So this is like 1971, 72. I remember, now this is going back. Scholastic Services used to have these books, Football Stars of the NFL, 1971, Baseball All-Stars, 1970, and all the rest of it. I used to get the books, and they used to have biographical stories about the players. They were great. And I remember they used to have a section, it was all black and white, of all the players, and they had a good Baseball All-Stars and Football All-Stars. They had about 20, 25 guys that they would do biographies on. And I just remember Lem Barney's is this black and white photograph of him in his helmet. And it was just like a headshot or a butt shot of him just like in action. It was kind of cool. Anyway, the Lions, last thing I want to say about them, they've had 17 winning titles from 1930 to 1957. They had 3 titles, 17 winning seasons. Since then, since 1957, they've had 39 losing seasons. 17 head coaches, not including interims. And like I said, they have not won a playoff game since 1992. That's a stretch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. They're basically 1-11 in their last playoff appearances. This is Will O'Toole, again, celebrating Thanksgiving and doing all things on the Detroit Lions. One of the hosts of the annual Thanksgiving Day games. I hope you have a great one and enjoy the games. Thank you very much.